guys, it's Lisa here. I wanted to talk a little bit more about narcissistic patriarch. And instead of sitting there talking to the camera, because look at these, wow. I find that I don't really like looking at my face, and I thought I'd just try something a little more creative. I have gathered some tarot cards here from my deck. Yes, I have chosen these specifically to help, I guess, tell my journey with the narcissist patriarch. So I have picked a few cards here and I will talk about them. First of all, I believe that in the whole deck, I'm probably close to the Queen of Cups. I feel she represents me. She isn't the strongest queen, but she does go through quite a bit of grief, I think. Definitely the Queen of Swords does, but yeah, a little bit of grief, loss, but she's also a wonderful mother figure, and I pull her a lot, so I'm going to put her here, right here, and I have a couple of cards here that I feel would represent my father. I have a hard time choosing which one, but he's sort of a blend of all of these. So first there's the Emperor. And I think that in his mind, he was the Emperor. He was the ultimate, powerful. And in his business, he was very successful. So Emperor definitely represents the male power in the world. Then next, the Hierophant. My father was raised a Jehovah's Witness, and he left the Jehovah's Witness church. No, you don't leave, you are excommunicated. And I would surmise that he was excommunicated when he got my mother pregnant at a very young age. And I'd say probably his rebellious spirit just wouldn't have fit growing up. Probably was a tough way to grow up. And this had an influence on him his whole life. He was, as in our family, it was interesting because we did not attend church. My mother's mother, so my maternal grandmother, she enjoyed going to church, and she would attend United Church services, and she took me once or twice as a child, and I really, really treasured those memories. I enjoyed it. But in our household, if anyone was to ask about religion or Jesus, it was a forbidden topic. And no one knew more about the Bible than my father. And he was quite righteous, very self-righteous about religion. And if you said the wrong thing, you would be verbally crushed. So the Hierophant definitely resonates with my father. I'm going to put him here. Okay, say a combination of these. Next, I would choose the King of Pentacles. And the King of Pentacles is quite powerful, very wealthy. And I think, you know, my father really, really needed to prove his success. He needed to prove his value. I think based on whatever happened in his childhood, some of those stories, and the excommunication of the Jehovah's Witness and the loss of his family due to that, created a great drive in my father. And the drive was to find success in his business. And he went through a lot. I mean, he, you know, he didn't finish high school, but he went back and took educational courses. I think he got a steam engineer certificate. So he, at a young age, did struggle with a lot of children. And he did in the end prove that he was very successful in business. So here's my patriarch. And here's me underneath. Queen of Cups. But, excuse me, I'd say before I became Queen of Cups, I was definitely the Fool. And this card really represents my naivety in dealing with my father. The blind trust that I did have with my father. And the fool that I felt a fool. And I think anyone who's been in a relationship with a narcissist will find that they do look back and think to themselves, well, why didn't I see this? Why didn't I understand this? So I feel this is definitely a card that probably a lot of us can relate to. It's a card of naivety. And during my marriage, up until probably a year and a half after my divorce or my separation from my ex-husband, I was the fool still. I was the fool probably for several years, excuse me, during my divorce, not fully understanding what was happening, what my father, how he was manipulating me, how he had manipulated me in the past. And a lot of this has to do with my father's business, you know, the family business, and utilizing his adult children, myself included. And during my divorce, a lot of things had to be disclosed, a lot of documents, financial documents, things had to be explained, and the King of Pentacles was not very happy about that. And as that dragged on, he became less and less happy about that. And instead of looking at what he had structured or, you know, what he had created, he wanted to put it on to his daughter. And I was a fool and allowed to take that burden. So that was the start of the unraveling. Up until that point, I did trust my father. I looked up to him. I loved my father. We had a rocky relationship. That's very true. He was a very moody person who would lose his temper very easily, unexpectedly. So sometimes you just didn't know what would set him off, which created instability. And in spite of all that, I still loved him because he could be very charming. He could be a lot of fun. He could be funny. And sometimes he'd say the right things, you know. Sometimes he would give me a compliment. But as I say, in this journey, during my divorce, I was still a fool. And I wanted to believe that my father was, his structures, his actions, his business were all made sense, that they were all what he said, that things were as he said. But I would later mature, and in my 40s, I know that sounds funny because it's kind of late, but I would mature throughout my divorce and become a queen. And I began to put away this fool and become my own woman. I questioned the King of Pentacles. I had the nerve to face him, and we faced each other with acrimony. And I began to question why things were the way they were. Why was I paying the price I was paying? And the King of Pentacles chose to continue to explain things and tell me that everything was fine and that what I was seeing wasn't real, and that what he told me was real. So we went face to face for several years, and during this period of time, interestingly, my ex-husband sued our family. He was part of the business, and he sued our family, and he sued me in addition. And here's where the Hanged Man comes in, because I definitely started to feel like the Hanged Man. I felt like I was losing control. I was losing control. I was stuck. And the King of Pentacles kept telling me not to worry. Everything was going to work out. If I did everything he needed me to do, if I did everything that he asked me to do. And the Patriarch was very powerful and included other men in my family. The whole of the Patriarch was quite powerful at this time, and I was trying to become the queen of my life. I was trying to be strong. I was trying to take back some control, but it was very difficult because I was the Hanged Man. I was stuck between the King of Pentacles, the patriarchy, and my ex-husband. And then as time went on, you know, I pull this card a few times, the Five of Pentacles. I call it the poverty card, although I know that there are other meanings, but I think that the Hanged Man, along with this card, really kind of represented where I was feeling at that time. I felt afraid. I was afraid of poverty. I was afraid of loss. I was afraid of the expenses I couldn't afford. I was afraid. I was afraid I would become this. And so it was sort of a scary time. And during all of this time, the King of Pentacles and his powerful personality were devaluing. They began to devalue the queen I was trying to become. I was getting too big for my own good, and the King of Pentacles began to devalue her. And the devaluing process always involves third parties, and the devaluing started to infect the family, and she became excluded from the family, excluded from the business that she had co-owned with her family for many years, and she became an outsider. If she had stayed, I just love this image, it's so pretty. I just put it here for decoration. If she had stayed the fool, I don't know, would she have been devalued, or would she have been kept in the family? I don't know. But meanwhile, these things were very disturbing. And eventually, when she began to wake up, she began to realize that she had, after the loss, she was going to have a fight on her hands. And ultimately, the Fool was replaced with the Tower. The Queen shook things up, and the Tower came tumbling. But there's always a price to pay to make change. There's a price to pay when you look for answers, when you look for truth. And there's a lot of swords. 10 of Swords. I pulled this card a lot. This is, it can be sort of seen as a rebirth, which I would say that, you know, part of this process was a rebirth for me. But it's also showing the absolute difficulty in going through that process. It's a growth process. And you can feel it's like a mini death. It can be painful. And I did go to therapy. I did. And another sword. This is the 8 of Swords. And I really don't need to say much here because you can see the picture. And I think along with becoming the queen, I had to go through this. I had to. And also I feel this represents the patriarch holding me back, trying to keep me in my place. With promises. With promises. If I just do as I'm told, I will be let out. Or in this case, I will be let back in. And the King of Pentacles ultimately has the power. And he doesn't mind. He doesn't mind. You know, the narcissist kind of enjoys seeing you suffer. He would take pleasure in this. More of the same. How long? How long can you do this for? How long can you wait? How long can you ask? How long can you challenge? How long can you persevere? Then, getting towards where I am now, and interestingly, here's a card that I have drawn so repeatedly often that it's become one of my favorite cards. The 9 of Pentacles. Such a hopeful, beautiful card. And I know in the guidebook, it's, you know, she stands on her property. It's her property. She's enjoying her success. And she even has a little friend that flies. And I just absolutely adore this card. And this card gives me hope. And this is where I see, after the tower has fallen, after the fight, and even where I am now, even though the fight is still continuing, I feel parts of her with me. Ooh, okay, this last card, guys. This is the ultimate card that I draw repeatedly. I've asked questions to the deck. This card comes up so often. Justice. Yep, that's a tough one. It's a tough one. Just know that looking for justice is a very, very, very trying and lengthy process. And there's no guarantee you will ever actually find it. But she pops up all the time in my readings, and so here she is, and I'm going to put her on top of the patriarchy right here. Okay, so that's my little story in tarot of my journey with the patriarch, the narcissistic patriarch. Thanks for tuning in, guys. If you have any questions, do put them in the comment section. Would love it. Thanks for joining me today. And I'll just mention it is a very brooding morning here with rain and cloud, and it just seemed like a nice time to grab the tarot deck and tell a story. Thanks for tuning in. Bye for now.